Welcome to this session of AIJC2020. Just some quick housekeeping before we start. There is translation in this session, so choose your language. Go to the global icon on the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on English or French and mute the main channel so you only get one sound channel. You will see Roy Blumenthal on the screen. He is our resident caricaturist and sketchnoter working live during the session, and you'll see his work from time to time, or certainly at the end of the session. Please use the Q&A function for your questions or comments, and the facilitator will pick them up from there. Have a great session.
So welcome everybody to this discussion this afternoon, where we're going to be looking at the challenges facing women investigative journalists. We also want to discuss some of the solutions and some of the technique that women journalists have used over the time in order to overcome these challenges. So conferences are great places to network, and I want to urge you to please introduce yourself in the chat. And as Anton said, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A. Some of our speakers will be speaking French, so I would suggest that you use the translation tool as indicated earlier on. So if you participated in the previous session, you'll know that investigative journalism remains under threat. It's challenging for everyone, whether you're male or female, and the challenges we're facing really are quite varied actually, whether it's social media backlash, whether it's legal threats, whether it's virtual or even physical threats, whether it's finding sources, etc. We all actually face really the same challenges when it comes to investigative journalism. But women investigative journalists also face unique challenges. Research shows that women journalists are often targeted with sexualized harassment, whether this is online or even in the real world. Women face discrimination and harassment, including sexual harassment, and not only in the newsroom, but also from potential sources, just generally. Patriarchal systems mean that women are often excluded from the inner circles of power and have restricted access to sources and therefore information. And very often, because they're not in those networks, they don't have access to resources such as financial resources, etc. Or their track in the newsroom is basically amongst issues like health journalism, or they're not perceived as the kind of people who can do investigative journalism. And certainly some of the comments that people have sent me ahead of the session have indicated that women who are joining the session really want to get an understanding of whether journalists across the continent are actually facing similar challenges that they face, and then how they actually overcome that. So investigative journalism is really expensive, and I really would like to be able to use the session to review how women can build networks to support one another, and also to begin to understand where we can access funding for our work, where we can find resources to build networks, and just basically support our endeavors around investigative journalism. So we're joined today by three incredible people who are not only have an understanding of investigative journalism, but are also currently taking real steps to give women the tools in order to make inroads in the field. So they know what kind of challenges we're facing when we're out there doing investigative journalism, and they also have real programs that they have tried and real things that they've tested in order to enhance investigative journalism. Our first speaker, our first of three speakers, will be Dus Namwezi, who is a journalist who leads the Awezo Africa Initiative in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I've known Dus for many years. She started in journalism at the age of 16 when she began talking on a local radio station addressing youth issues such as child soldiers. She then joined the Women Media Association, AFEM, in the DRC, and with her colleagues, she actually founded Mama Radio, which was the first thematic and community radio station in the DRC that focused on gender equality. Dus is a trainer in journalism, gender and women leadership, and she has been, she's an award-winning journalist, including the Courageous Action Award from the Center for Nonviolence and Peace Studies of the University of Rhode Island. And in 2012, she was awarded the Superior Returning Oren presentation by the UN Women's Young Women in Seoul, South Korea, for her presentation on new strategies for empowering women. Our next speaker after that actually is not only an award-winning investigative journalist, but is also driving a program in Burkina Faso to increase the number of women in data journalism. Arno Ouedraogo is an investigative journalist who has worked for 10 years for the Burkinabe daily L'Observateur Palga, and he's currently the coordinator of the Norbert Zongo Cell for Investigative Journalism in West Africa, Senozo. It's one of the most important investigative journalism organizations on the continent, and he also coordinated with Will Fitzgibbon of the ICIJ, the work of 20 African journalism who took part in the recent FinCENS files. We're then going to open up the discussion to some women investigative journalists who are going to give us some feedback from their experiences in the field. And then I'm going to hand you over to Kathy McGroby of Quote This Woman, who's going to be talking about practical steps of increasing the number of women sources in your investigative journalism. She is the founder and the director of Quote This Woman, starting, which is a media startup that's doing incredible work actually across the continent. Well, now it's moving across the continent, but it's done really well in terms of giving journalists in South Africa resources that they haven't had before. Before that, she is a well-known communications and media strategist here in South Africa, and a trainer who focuses mainly in the development sector with a particular interest in health, rural development, social justice, and ICT for development. So without further ado, let me hand over to our first speaker, Dus Namwezi. Dus?
Thank you, Paula. Merci beaucoup. I'll be speaking. I'm sorry because I didn't have enough time for me to prepare the presentation. But I just write some, sorry, I go back into French. So, je préparais quelques points pour aller parler de l'expérience de femmes journalistes en République démocratique du Congo lorsqu'il s'agit de journalistes d'investigation. Ce qui se passe en République démocratique du Congo, c'est qu'il y a plusieurs défis, beaucoup de défis que les femmes journalistes font face, et auxquels aussi certains hommes journalistes aussi font face, mais qui sont vraiment spécifiques, puisque ces défis sont liés au contexte politique, au contexte économique et aussi au contexte identitaire, même du pays. Il y a beaucoup de conflits identitaires par rapport aux groupes armés, par rapport aux tribus et également aux différentes tribus ou clans qui existent au niveau du pays. Et pour parler du contexte politique, lorsque les femmes journalistes doivent, par exemple, couvrir des événements politiques ou bien des sujets politiques, c'est très difficile pour elles d'abord d'accéder aux sources d'information, puisque j'essaie de focaliser ma présentation par rapport aux sources d'information, aussi à la sécurité des civils. des journalistes en cette période. Qu'est-ce qui se passe très souvent? C'est qu'il y a une prolifération de médias actuellement, surtout avec la digitalisation, l'avènement de l'Internet. Il y a beaucoup d'informations qu'on peut trouver sur des plateformes en ligne. Mais généralement, ce ne sont pas toujours des informations vraies ou vérifiables. Lorsqu'on veut creuser, on veut investiguer, là, il faut prendre des risques. On prend des risques puisque là, on doit aller rencontrer des hommes politiques ou des personnalités politiques qui ne veulent pas forcément assez que leur plan ou bien leur façon d'agir soit connue de tout le monde, surtout lorsqu'il s'agit de l'exploitation des minéraux. Il y a beaucoup d'hommes qui sont candidats aux élections et qui se sont enrichis de façon illicite en exploitant les minéraux. Il y a certainement beaucoup qui ont lu de rapports par rapport aux minéraux des camps en République démocratique du Congo. Et lorsque vous voulez devenir un politicien et accéder à des postes de responsabilité, vous ne voulez pas que le journaliste puisse faire référence à votre passé. Et pourtant, généralement, lorsque vous voulez le faire, et lorsque vous êtes une femme journaliste, le premier défi, c'est d'abord des intimidations. Puisque là, il va vouloir assez que vous puissiez couvrir l'événement comme tout le monde. Juste l'effet superficiel du genre montrer la bonne image de la personne, ne pas essayer de passer, puisque là, vous essayez de mettre en carrière toute mettre en danger toute sa carrière. Et aussi d'autres facteurs, d'autres événements politiques, mais économiques sont mis dans notre contexte lorsqu'il s'agit de lutter contre la corruption. Que là, en tant que journaliste, très facilement, les personnes ou bien les sources d'informations que vous pensez que ça peut être des grandes entreprises qui sont peut-être soutenues par des millionnaires, des multinationales. Lorsque vous voulez creuser dans ces quelconques, généralement, elles-mêmes proposent même de l'argent au pot de vin pour ne pas investiguer davantage. Et donc là, vous pouvez accéder aux sources, mais ces sources vont essayer de vous museler, de vous empêcher de parler. Et ça devient aussi très, très compliqué dans un contexte où la corruption est presque partout, mais aussi, il ne s'agit pas seulement lorsqu'on couvre des événements intéressants comme la politique ou l'économie, mais même lorsqu'on couvre des sujets par rapport aux droits humains, par rapport à l'égalité du genre, parce que personnellement, je suis très à fond par rapport à cette thématique de l'égalité. Lorsque vous allez même de chercher de l'information par rapport aux droits dans le pays, pour le droit à la santé sexuelle reproductive, pour la question des participations politiques des femmes, tout ce que ces sujets, a priori, qui ne semblent pas sensibles, mais qui ne plaisent pas forcément, puisque vous demandez des comptes. C'est comme une opportunité de responsabilité pour les politiciens. Et là, en tant que femme journaliste, on cherche à tout prix à vous faire taire. Notre réalité par rapport au Congo, sur ce qui concerne surtout la sécurité des femmes journalistes, c'est qu'on est dans un contexte de non-paix, non-guerre. Donc, il n'y a pas de paix, il n'y a pas de... Donc, face à des contextes très difficiles à vivre, puisque des zones qui sont en conflit, où il y a vraiment de groupes armés qui se battent, et lorsque vous voulez y aller, il y a tout autour de conflits armés qui peuvent être le harcèlement, le viol et le kidnapping. Je crois que vous savez tous suivi les deux collègues journalistes et enquêteurs qui ont été tués au Congo. Et là, c'est l'ONU, c'est la plus grande institution qui essaie d'enquêter par rapport à leur mort, mais c'est simplement puisque ils essayaient de creuser davantage sur les faits des politiciens. Donc, dans notre contexte où la guerre, le conflit armé sont là, lorsque vous êtes une femme journaliste, par rapport à lorsque vous êtes un homme journaliste, vous avez beaucoup plus de probabilité d'être harcelé, d'être violé lorsque vous allez rencontrer ces auteurs de ces massacres. Et là, ça dissuade plus ou moins, ça dissuade beaucoup pour continuer à enquêter. Et beaucoup de femmes vont rester dans le factuel, juste informer de façon basique, en répondant aux questions qui, quoi, comment, donner. Mais lorsqu'il s'agit maintenant d'essayer de donner du nouveau, d'essayer d'amener vraiment les citoyens à comprendre davantage ce qui se passe dans le pays, là, ça devient un peu plus compliqué. Une autre chose que je voulais apporter par rapport à la sécurité, il s'agit actuellement aussi de ce harcèlement en ligne qui existe aussi pour le journaliste vraiment intéressé par le journalisme. Donc, actuellement, il ne s'agit pas seulement de menaces ou bien de attaques armées où on peut te tuer, on peut te violer. Mais maintenant, il y a tous ces hackers qui sont en ligne, qui peuvent aussi vous menacer, qui peuvent aussi vous empêcher de faire votre travail en tant que journaliste. Et là, ça devient aussi difficile parce que beaucoup de femmes journalistes ici au pays ne sont pas encore formées sur comment répondre à cette situation d'harcèlement en ligne, comment répondre aussi lorsque même puisqu'au sein même de votre rédaction, c'est parfois les collègues qui ne vont pas vous croire que vous êtes harcelé, peut-être vous-même qui ne réalisez pas qu'il s'agit d'une fausse information ou bien d'un hacker qui a piraté ton compte, ce genre de choses. Et c'est des défis actuels qui sont différents de ceux qui se font le média traditionnel, comme la radio, la télé, de façon basique. Mais ceux qui sont en ligne actuellement sont vraiment, ils connaissent aussi ce genre de problèmes. I don't know, I have to go up to when? Paula, do I have? Okay. Yeah, so just to sum up, pour finir, je pense que j'ai mis en œuvre un peu ces défis d'accéder aux sources et aussi à la sécurité. Puisque lorsqu'il s'agit de sources officielles, des sources militaires, des sources policières, là, c'est des sujets qui sont très sensibles, parce que tout le système politique, judiciaire est très faible. Et lorsque tu veux enquêter sur la corruption dans la police et tout ça, tu peux faire des années et des années en train de chercher des faits, des preuves, et vous ne les saurez pas. Et là, c'est pas que la femme journaliste ne peut pas investiguer, mais on va trouver que le système est plein de corruption, il y a tous ces défis économiques. Parfois, on vous demande même l'argent en tant que journaliste pour dire si tu veux que je te donne tel document, il faut que tu me donnes de l'argent. Là, ça devient vraiment compliqué. Mais à côté de ça, il y a quand même des efforts qui sont faits, puisque ça ne décourage pas. C'est vrai que jusque-là, il y a très peu de journalistes de façon générale, hommes et femmes, qui font vraiment de l'investigation. Il y en a peut-être 3, 4 ou 5 qui essaient vraiment d'écrire même des livres par rapport aux groupes armés qui sont au pays, qui essayent aussi de creuser par rapport à la corruption, à ce qui se passe comme lors des élections et tout ça. Mais cela ne décourage pas, en fait, le fait de continuer à se focaliser, surtout à exiger une démocratie beaucoup plus plurielle qui va permettre que cette ouverture des libertés d'expression et qui est conditionnée aussi par un journalisme de paix, un journalisme qui permet à tout le monde d'être un citoyen digne. Je crois que comme le temps est donné est parti, on pourra discuter toujours lors de, soit dans le chat ou après les présentations des autres données. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Just we're going to take questions at the end of our session. So I'm going to move on now. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that you brought up that I'd like us to discuss later on when we're doing the Q&A. But certainly the issues of safety, I think we need to maybe discuss a bit more. But I want to hand over now to Arno, who's going to share with us a little bit. Arno missed the earlier session today, and so I'm hoping that he will share with us a couple of the challenges that he's experienced as an investigative journalist, and then tell us what Sanozo is actually doing in Burkina Faso in order to support women get the skills for investigative journalism. So Arno, over to you, please.
Merci. D'accord. Je vais essayer de le faire en anglais, même si je ne suis pas à l'aise avec cette langue. C'est vrai que je l'ai préparé ainsi, je l'ai préparé en anglais. Je ne savais pas en fait qu'il y aurait une interprétation, sinon j'aurais tranquillement fait ma communication en français. So I would like to present to you our project empowerment of West African women journalists through data journalism pilot program on Burkina Faso. The major environment in general and particularly in West Africa is male dominated. Most of the time in West Africa, women in the media are confined to presentation roles when it comes to audiovisual media. They are not very numerous to occupy position of responsibility or to cover dangerous events. This maldomination is even more noticeable when we start talking about investigative journalism. Sanozo has been able to make this observation since its creation through its activities. As these graphs show, women journalists have very little interest in investigative journalism. Even the mentioned encouraged female candidacy in our calls for application is not enough to mobilize them. So in the criteria for evaluating profiles, we add 5 points to women to give them a head start. I hope that everyone understands me because I have bad accent. What is the problem? The problem is primarily cultural in Africa. Most West African societies are dominated by men. As a result, women are not used to performing in the presence of men. This is why many women, even when they are competent, sometimes do not dare to express themselves freely in editorial offices. When we talk about investigative journalism or political issues, they do not feel concerned. They often find it very dangerous and have to take their husband's opinions into account. And the men who mostly run the editorial offices do not entrust women with the important task ever, or do not encourage them enough to take an interest in investigation. The reality is that many women journalists cannot go away for long periods of time to investigate or a given subject without causing a problem at home. In this situation presents two challenges: a need for specific training adapted for women journalists and a policy to reduce the gender gap in the media. So we believe that if women master the tools and technical of data journalism and investigation, they would be able to deal in depth with important issues without necessarily being away from home for long periods of time. It's why Senozo think to this project to allow women to do investigative journalism daily. So this project contains 3 parts. It is a pilot program only for Burkina Faso women journalists. We recruited 15 women journalists from Burkina Faso. They are training for 1 week in data journalism and investigative reporting. After this stage, then we give them grants to produce short stories according to Senozo standards, mentoring and legal screening. Once we publish the investigation, we will bring the women journalists together with civil society and policymakers to discuss the facts they were revealed by the stories. This is how we will be able to make a difference, giving women journalists a voice, providing leadership in the media, and raising public debate on sensitive issues. For this, so I will repeat, maybe somebody don't well understand. We recruited 15 women journalists from Burkina Faso and trained them on 1 week for data journalism and investigative reporting. After, we gave them 15 grants to produce stories according to Senozo standard mentoring and legal screening. After publication, we bring the women journalists together, policymakers and civil society to discuss about the facts they were revealed by the stories. This is how we think it is the best way to give leadership to women to change our environment in Burkina Faso and West Africa. At Senozo, we are convinced that as an institution, as an investigation center, a training center and publisher, our role must also be to stimulate public debate, bridging the gap between journalists and civil society, and why not decision makers. So it is what I want to share with you. I hope that maybe it is c'est mieux que je revienne en français. J'espère que cette communication a apporté quelque chose de nouveau dans la manière de voir les choses. Ça a été très bref. C'était juste pour montrer comment à la Senozo, on a réfléchi en fait à réduire le gap de genre qu'il y a entre les hommes et les femmes dans les médias. Comment on a réfléchi aussi à limiter la peur des femmes à se lancer dans le journalisme d'investigation. Comme vous l'avez pu le constater dans ce que je disais, le problème se situe à 2 niveaux. Les journalistes, d'abord hommes, ont du mal à concevoir que les femmes puissent traiter de sujets très sensibles, puissent aller sur les terrains dangereux et essuyer parfois les tirs, puissent enquêter sur des sujets sensibles qui font que les hommes subissent d'énormes menaces. Ça, c'est d'abord leurs confrères hommes qui ont ces idées reçues. Et de l'autre côté, il y a les femmes elles-mêmes qui, de par leur éducation, même quand elles sont très compétentes, même quand elles sont très bien formées, ont du mal à affirmer leur leadership, ont du mal à prendre la parole même parfois en simple conférence de rédaction. Et quand il s'agit d'aller investiguer, elles pensent que c'est un truc d'homme parce qu'elles trouvent ça très dangereux et nous avons pensé que les réunir uniquement que elles sur un projet pour leur donner la capacité de maîtriser le data journalisme qui leur permet de travailler dans leur environnement habituel sans forcément voyager et rester longtemps, pouvait les aider en fait à résoudre ce problème. Et on dit souvent chez nous que éduquer une femme, c'est éduquer une nation. Et une femme, journaliste d'investigation, qui sait enquêter et révéler des choses sur les questions des droits des femmes, va contribuer beaucoup à changer la condition de la femme d'abord et aussi la condition des hommes en général. Voilà en fait l'idée qui a prévalu au niveau des Cenozo à mettre en place ce projet, qui est un projet pilote qui, là actuellement, les femmes sont en train de produire. L'étape suivante, ce sera qu'elles vont après les publications, on va les mettre dans des tables rondes avec la société civile et les décideurs politiques afin qu'on puisse débattre franchement de ce que les enquêtes qu'elles vont produire vont révéler. Cela peut-être peut permettre de... Ah, ma connexion est instable, on me dit. Ah oui. Cela, nous pensons que ça peut permettre en fait de changer les choses. Ça donne de la matière à la société civile en fait d'actionner sur leur levier pour que les décideurs publics puissent faire bouger les choses, puissent améliorer les problèmes qui seront révélés. Et aussi, nous pensons que à travers ce projet, on aura plus, selon la vision de Cenozo, c'est de créer une communauté de journalistes d'investigation de qualité en Afrique de l'Ouest. Et on aura plus de femmes qui le font au quotidien. Déjà, quand vous prenez la centaine de membres de Cenozo, je pense qu'on on doit avoir moins de 10% de femmes. Quand vous prenez nos activités, que ce soit les bourses que nous donnons pour le développement des enquêtes et que ce soit les formations que nous organisons, nous peinons chaque fois à atteindre le quota des 40% de femmes qui nous est demandé, et parfois par nos bailleurs et pour nous-mêmes. Donc, il était important pour nous de réfléchir à quelque chose qui puisse vraiment donner une autonomie aux femmes en matière de journalisme d'investigation. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very, very much, Arnaud. I want to just very, very briefly ask some of the investigative journalists in the participants group just to tell us some of the challenges that they've had working in the field and what kind of resources or issues that they would like to see being put forward to help women investigative journalists. And I want to ask Barbara Among, I pulled in her earlier on from Uganda, who's one of the participants, if we could give her permission to use her camera and to speak. Barbara, why don't you just share with us some of the challenges that you've experienced while working as an investigative journalist in Uganda?
Thank you so much, Paula, and good morning or good afternoon to everyone. It's always a pleasure interacting and meeting AIJs across the world. For me, having practiced journalism and especially focused on investigative journalism for more than 10 years now, I get to realize that the challenges actually grow almost each year. There are new challenges that crop up. From the traditional challenges we have of government clamping on you as a journalist, tracking you as a journalist, to the new challenges that come from corporates. It's a much bigger challenge right now that we face in my country. And I've also heard from other journalists than even the governments and the security organizations coming after you as a female journalist, especially. Because these corporates or these global companies are powerful, they have the money, they have the connections, and they actually even control governments. So it's become more dangerous to investigate corporates. It's become very dangerous actually to investigate even individuals who work within these corporates because they're capable of hiring anyone to actually come after you as a journalist. They are also capable of hiring people within the organization that you work for. For example, for those who are already employed, I've experienced this. where they hire your workmates, they're on their payrolls, where they actually even go to the extent of trying to hire your own editor, not to either run that story, but then also to share information, details about you, about where you stay, about your family, about your children, because these are the people you work with. I've realized that as the years go by, I'm not focusing more on governments, I'm focusing more on the corporate companies because they've become much more dangerous to me.
I was going to ask Barbara if you've ever done safety training.
Yes, I have done safety training with the international IWMF, International Women's Media Foundation. I have done those safety, both for online security and then the physical safety that I have done. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And is it something that you would recommend to other women who are doing investigative journalism?
Yes, I would. I would recommend those safety because then you become more alert to so many dangers around you. The dangers are actually more than just kidnapping you. It's more than just tracking you. It's more than just the dangers move away from you as because we've learned to protect ourselves. The dangers now move to your loved ones. And I would recommend this kind of training. How do you protect your loved ones while you practice investigative journalism? How do you protect your children while you practice investigative journalism? How do you protect your spouse, your mother, your father? And because that's because we've learned to protect ourselves, the focus now moves away from us to hurt you through the people around you. So this kind of training helps you to keep alert, but helps you to protect now the people around you more than yourself.
Barbara, thank you so much. I know that Hamdi Hassan from the Somalian Women's Media Network was also sending some comments on the challenges that they experience in Somalia. And one of the things that she was talking about was the issue of security and basically kind of looking at what kind of security issues what other journalists were doing, but then also the issue of getting access to sources. And I want to move over to Kathy McGrovey from Quote This Woman. So Kathy, could you perhaps share with us the experiences, the kind of resources that you put together for women and how they can actually use it for their investigative journalism work? So over to you, Kathy.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen and go into a presentation. So on Monday, when I started prepping for this presentation, wait, let me just see, there we go. I did a quick dive into Africa-based news, and I started with Al Jazeera's Africa page. This is a screenshot of what it was on Monday. These were the 4 main stories there, and I just did a count of how many women's sources that there were on that day. There were 12 sources in total across these 4 stories. Any guesses as to how many women? Well, I won't leave you waiting. 3. So actually, that's really good. It's above the universal average. I then moved on to allafrica.com, who do media a bit differently, I'm sure most of you know. They link to stories that other news houses write rather than writing the stories themselves. You can see down in the bottom of the page the main stories that they quoted. I found 21 sources in total across those 4 stories and 10 women. Now that sounds good, but you have to bear in mind that the story on the bottom left of your screen was about the AIDS, sex abuse in DRC. And that story had a lot of women sources in it, 6 to be exact. So there were only 4 women sources across the other stories. I just want to dig deeper into that. There's research that shows that less than 4% of news reporting actively challenges gender stereotypes, and growing advocacy to look at not only how reporting languages reinforce binary roles of victim and aggressor, but how photography and graphic art accompanying articles does this too. I'm not sure that an image could ladle stereotypes with the heavier hand of a child. The broken window, the double bed with a single pillow on it, the beautiful woman with the lowered glance. I just wonder, when putting this image to this article, how much thought was given to rape and abuse survivors seeing this image and how they might be triggered. And that pull-out quote, "They had you with their eyeballs," if that was the best this article could merit. The online version of this article has actors reenacting the testimonies of those who reported sex crimes. Again, the extra sensory dimension of victim status being played out by an actor just veers too close to salaciousness for my comfort. It doesn't deepen the story, only the stereotype. In the article that was linked here, as I said before, 6 women are quoted and 3 men, and that's really good. But there are 2 quotes from people living right in the area where the story unfolded, and in each case, the source is named by their first name only. The next place I looked was at the continent, where the first woman's source appears on page 17 on a property rights story. It's a lawyer representing the NCPA, and that lawyer just happens to be a woman. This edition of the continent is 30 pages, so it's well past halfway before the first woman appears as a source. So this is the context in which I sat down to do this presentation. Let me jump in right now and tell you a bit about Quote This Woman, who we are and what we can do to help you, women investigative journalists, and in fact all journalists, fight gender bias and to close the news gender gap, and why we think it's crucially important that you do so. So Quote This Woman is a nonprofit that links journalists to a database of leading women experts that we curate mainly from South Africa, but more recently from across Southern Africa and indeed the rest of Africa. We lobby media to look beyond their male sound bites for sources, and we monitor for biases that show in news reporting. Currently, there's no cost to experts for being on our database or for reporters for using it. We train women to feel safe in the media or any spotlight, and we help journalists find great stories while still closing the gender gap. The plus in our name covers the fact that beyond our data, that our database is open beyond women to all voices that are marginalized in mainstream news, whether because of disability or sexual identity, gender orientation, poverty, education, rural location, or anything else. So where are the women in news? The current universal ratio of men to women as news experts is 4:1. What does that mean? It means that the people producing news stories are actively amplifying the voices and actions of one part of the population over the other. And that's a problem because men and women, as we all know, experience life differently. When women's voices are absent, their perspectives are absent. Perspectives that are critical to deep and broad debates and to a rich media landscape and the narratives that underpin not only public opinion, but policy making. So why does this exist? Because deciding who makes news is a complex juggling act made by journalists, editors, and producers daily in the context of diminishing budgets, few experienced staff, fake news, and workloads that have expanded to include the creation of content across increased numbers of media platforms. Newsrooms need the help. The pressure to get a snappy soundbite from an established expert is intense, and often this means that journalists fall back on the sources they are familiar with, and that's likely to be a man. We know that many news teams will broaden their source lists and close the gender gap if they can implicitly trust both the sources and the organization advocating those sources to them, and if it's really easy for them to do so. So we've created a database just to do this. Our database has got over 350 credible expert thought leader sources from overlooked demographics in over 40 categories. We say we start at agriculture and we go all the way to xenophobia. We cover business, conservation, the economy, electricity, health, land, mining, politics, sport, water, violence, and so much more. Currently, the greatest areas of experts for us are gender and the broader aspects of COVID-19. Anyone working in news can access our database by applying through our website, and that's in the tip sheet that I think is linked from this session. Our database contains email addresses and bios. It doesn't have cell phone details of the experts, but you can contact us if you want those. So this is just a snapshot of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 experts off the database. They're people who we've been, whose names we've given out a lot recently, and mainly to do with the COVID pandemic. Alana Potter was the go-to person across Africa around sanitation and access to water during the pandemic. Bhavna Ranji, workers' rights, vulnerable work. Dr. T is United Nations special rapporteur on health, on the right to health. Safira Abdul Karim is the go-to person on pricing around vaccines. Asanda Gosheng has established herself around the Black Lives Matter movement. And then Intumonyo Hamukoma as a futurist based in Morocco. And those are just a real snapshot. This is a look at what our fortnightly media updates look like, and I encourage everybody to sign up for them. Again, you can link this from our tip sheet, which you should be able to access through this forum. This is an old tip sheet. In fact, one went out, this is an old newsletter. In fact, one went out today, and I'll send a link when I finish speaking to that. We use our newsletters to highlight the latest and most important people at any given time. So this is just an example of a newsroom reaching out to us for experts when they're working on stories. This was The Citizen. Usually it's helpful if we're given a deadline so we know how urgent your story is. And also it's helpful if you call or WhatsApp so we know to check our email. This is another story. This is actually from a journalist working for Courts Africa. Here you can see the journalist query, the person who she quoted, who we sent to her, and then feedback from the expert thanking us and saying being quoted helped her in her job. Don't ever underestimate how good media coverage builds women's agency too. What makes Quote This Woman different from other databases is our human element. We help journalists find the right person they need for the story they're working on, and will actively help find a source if we don't have someone on our database currently. Obviously, if your deadline is far enough away. There's no rule book for what we're trying to do, and we count on our community, which includes the media, for support, and it seems to be working. Our belief is that women don't necessarily do news better, but they do it differently, and we really think that difference is important. Thanks, Paula. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very, very much, Kathy. And I just have to say that I have to kind of say upfront that I am a fan of Quote This Woman, and I am a promoter of Quote This Woman. I cannot think of a better project in terms of making sure that we increase the number of women in our stories as expert sources and not and not merely as color or as kind of a human interest angle, but actually having women comment on issues like the economy, etc. And so I would strongly recommend, you don't have to be in South Africa. You should really kind of have a look at it, and as much as possible encourage people, if you don't have one in your own country, either encourage experts to sign up on Quote This Woman, or encourage somebody to actually start something similar in different regions. It's a really incredible resource. We have quite a number of questions. We've got some questions on Hoover. And so I want to just bring those up. So Mbau Chabula said that she's curious to know if challenges that women journalists face are similar from despite the different countries that they come from. Because so few women have made a name in this investigative journalism field. So I'd love for Deuce to perhaps comment on that. And then Wendy Akula also had a comment to say, that even though a lot of women actually get degrees in the field, many don't actually end up practicing or doing investigative journalism because of their harsh environment in which we practice. And so just I wonder if you could just speak maybe to that about the fact that so few women have actually made inroads into this field. Although I need to point out that we have lots of women in this session who actually are well-known investigative journalists. So Arnaud and Deuce, do you want to comment on that?
Ok, donc si j'ai bien compris, c'est par rapport au fait que malgré tous ces défis, il y a des femmes qui sont parvenues à se faire un nom dans le métier. Exactement. Ok. Donc, comme je disais, même par rapport à la réalité du Congo, c'est pas que cette situation difficile du journalisme d'investigation décourage tout le monde ou bien décourage toutes les femmes. Il y a toujours des exceptions qui confirment cette règle, puisque lorsqu'on analyse par rapport à la couverture des sujets qui sont importants pour les consommateurs, qui sont la population, qui sont les hommes et les femmes, les jeunes, il y a des personnes très passionnées, il y a des personnes très engagées et qui se disent, malgré tous ces défis, un peu comme Barbara disait, il y a toujours des alternatives, il y a toujours des solutions. Lorsque vous suivez autant de formations, lorsque vous suivez, vous observez les règles par rapport au métier, il arrive effectivement que vous continuez à percer et à créer aussi les chemins pour d'autres, puisque par exemple, c'est que Cathy vient de présenter par rapport aux sources, aux expertes et femmes et tout ça, c'est des choses intéressantes que peut-être les générations qui viennent ne vont pas connaître les mêmes difficultés que nous actuellement et que c'est toujours un processus, mais il faut bien sûr commencer de quelque part, il faut bien sûr avoir cette passion au fait du métier, qui peut permettre à ce que vous puissiez vous dire, même s'il y a des coups de balles qui sont en train de pleurer, même s'il y a il n'y a pas de route, il n'y a pas d'eau, il n'y a pas d'électricité, etc., ben, je vais quand même couvrir cette thématique. Et ben, il arrive parfois aussi que généralement, ce sont les médias étrangers ou bien les médias internationaux qui vont payer les journalistes ou encourager les journalistes aussi à couvrir des sujets, puisque localement, vous allez trouver qu'il y a cette question économique de pauvreté, les consommateurs qui n'ont pas toujours les moyens de pouvoir payer la presse, et ça décourage un peu. Alors, le peu de femmes qui ont de networking, qui peuvent avoir de réseautage avec d'autres, en profitent aussi pour exceller et pour être meilleures dans leur profession.
Thank you very much. I want to, so Anna, one of the things that struck me about your program is that you also gave stipends for women to be able to do stories afterwards, right? So it wasn't just giving them the skills, you were also giving them the ability to be able to do the stories. And I was wondering whether you had a number of stories published as a result of the training and of the stipend.
D'accord, merci. Non, pas encore. Après la formation qui a eu lieu, parce que le programme, on l'a lancé en juillet dernier, et la formation a eu lieu au courant du mois de juillet. On a lancé les différentes investigations avec les femmes. Elles sont actuellement en train de travailler, elles sont sur le terrain, ça avance. Nous suivons de près avec les éditeurs. Elles sont toutes à un premier draft qui ont été éditées, elles sont réparties sur le terrain. Et nous escomptons en fait les premières publications, parce qu'il s'agit de 15 histoires quand même. Nous escomptons les premières publications à partir du mois de novembre, si tout se passe bien. Et une fois que tout sera publié, en tout cas d'ici fin février, mi-mars, et l'étape suivante, ça sera l'organisation des tables rondes avec la société civile et quelques décideurs politiques pour discuter en fait du contenu des seront diffusés. Nous espérons que ces tables rondes vont permettre en fait aux journalistes de présenter les résultats de leur travail directement aux personnes qui sont censées en tout cas pouvoir intervenir pour qu'on trouve les solutions par rapport aux problèmes qui seront révélés. Et je pense que ça, c'est une première concernant le cas du Burkina, par exemple. Il n'y a jamais eu un tel cadre où, même pour des journalistes hommes, mais un tel cadre où on réunit la société civile et les décideurs politiques pour discuter en fait d'enquêtes qui ont été diffusées, qui ont exposé des problèmes de santé publique, par exemple, afin de savoir quelle est la position du gouvernement, quelles décisions devraient être prises. Et nous avons lancé ce défi et j'espère qu'on va y parvenir. Sinon, pour le moment, aucune histoire n'est publiée. En tout cas, pas sur ce projet.
Great. Thank you very much, Anna. I wonder if we could move over to Najat Omar from Tanzania. Just very, very briefly, Najat, if you could perhaps quickly share your own experiences around investigative journalism in Tanzania and how you've actually overcome some of these issues that we've raised today. So Najat, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Paula. Did you hear me?
Hi. Yes, we
Hi.
do. Yes.
Okay, sorry. I think I had a cold. My voice is just going. I don't know why. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's very tough. It's very tough now. Now it's very tough more than past years. I think now the law and the regulations has tied us more. Now there's a place that you can touch. There's a place that you can cover, you can talk, you can ask, you can do anything, you know. You're just doing like a rap story. Someone say this, someone say that, someone say this, someone say that. But 2 years back, we had opportunity to dig down and to know exactly what happened and to know exactly what people want, what people say, and to sometimes even though to witness what a challenging facing people and women and the teenager. I used to, I could say that I used to cover a story about a gender story about raping, those kind of mad story. But now when you're starting doing that, you need to tell your editor that I'm going to cover this story. Before you got there, the people already know that you're going to do it. So you just call unknown call. Hey, can you stop doing that? And now you have a family, you have a mom, you have everybody. So they starting threatening you like you can do this. You know, we want this work, we want this job. For example, this year on February, I was investigating a story about cotton payment system. You know what, Paula, when I was there, they just captured a picture of me. And I have been called by district commissioner officer that, Najat, this is you. People capture your photo. Why did you go there without my permission? And then the story just died like that. So first, it's because I'm a female journalist, but second, like sometimes you just thinking like you have a family, you have a husband, you have a son. So sometimes when they are taking decision, they just compare my family on that, my nationality, where I coming from. You know, I'm working from this part of Tanzania. I'm coming from Zanzibar. So when I'm doing something here, they say, you know what, you are coming here to spying us, you know, you come from Kenya, you come from this and this. So it just demoralizing me. And I say like, okay, I think I can stop this. So it's a 1 year now. I can't cover the story because I'm fear. fear of my family, in fear sometimes to be courted. Nowadays, I don't want even people to make an interview with me. Like last month, a DW called me. They want to know exactly what happened on this election campaign, and I say, hey guys, sorry, I can talk. I can talk. Yeah, so it's very tough.
So Najat, one of the questions that came up in the chat was people were asking how do we do what Burkina Faso did, which is to kind of have an association of women. I think Diana asked, how do you create an association of women journalists? And maybe Tus, you could also speak to that, because I know from my own personal experience that we've got a Tanzanian Women's Federation, we've got a Somali Women's Media Federation, AFM, AFEM in the DRC, right? I mean, there are quite a number of different organizations. So Tus, maybe you could talk about what can women do to be able to gather resources in order to build skills like Burkina Faso have done, to do security training the way we've done in Uganda with the IWMF, to do to just build networks, resources, etc.
Paula, thank you. I think first, I think first we need to be sure as a women what we want. First, that is very good things. Lakini, but also, sorry, I just mixed up with Swahili. But also, I think we need a backup too, because people like you, people like IWMF, people like other NGOs, like Barbara, Daus, and others, and Katie too. They have this kind of NGO that we can have a protection. Like maybe sometime I'm out of the field. I need help. I need people to defend me. I think we need more training. We need more training about how we can cover story without harm anybody, without being harmed. But also we need a security training, that how can we face those kind of scenario that can happen when we are on the field. But also we need a more network. Maybe I can cover a story from Tanzania, freedom of speech, but I can publish it. So I can sell to person to Uganda. So she or he can publish it without the society and citizen know that it's me who investigate the story. But even though I think sometimes, even though we need too much privacy to share our things as women, so we can understand each other, like, hey, I'm being through this and I need this story to be published, but don't mention my name. But now in the newsroom, confidence is too little.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Najat. I want to hand over to Tus. And then the other question that came up was also related to what Barbara said earlier on about our colleagues even telling organizations about the stories that we're investigating, etc. And the question, Tus, that I think Collins was asking was, should we name and shame people who expose us as investigative journalists, particularly when they're our colleagues? So just you, and then I'm going to ask Anno and Kathy to maybe say a few final words as well. So just to you.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, comme Nadja vient de le dire, par rapport au fait d'être femme journaliste, de travailler dans des organisations, ben moi, je pense que l'expérience d'Arnaud, c'est une expérience à capitaliser, puisque l'Organisation des femmes journalistes au Congo, par exemple, faisait face d'abord à tous ces stéréotypes culturels et préjugés d'être femme journaliste tout court, pas même d'être femme journaliste d'investigation, puisque là, c'était une étape encore élevée. Et ce n'est qu'au fil de temps que les journalistes se sont assumés dans la profession et ont commencé à tenter également d'exercer ce métier d'investigation sur d'autres terrains. Et cela, ça a été facilité parfois par des programmes d'autres femmes journalistes étrangères comme IWMF qui peuvent soutenir effectivement beaucoup plus de formation et de formation approfondie des femmes journalistes. Maintenant, pour revenir à la question, lorsque c'est une autre femme journaliste qui ne facilite pas le travail ou bien qui n'encourage pas l'autre femme journaliste de pouvoir mener à bon port son travail, est-ce qu'il faut le nommer, est-ce qu'il faut le dire clairement? Je crois que ça dépend du cas par cas. C'est que si c'est une question peut-être de sécurité, une question de vie par rapport à toi-même, puis c'est pas puisqu'elle est une femme journaliste qu'elle n'est pas nuisible. Il peut y avoir aussi des personnes mal intentionnées qui aussi se disent ben je n'aime pas cette histoire qu'elle est en train de couvrir, je n'aime pas cette façon de creuser dans ce qui me concerne et qui est aussi capable de nuire ou bien de vendre la brèche aux politiciens ou aux multinationales ou à d'autres personnes qui effectivement sont concernées par l'histoire. Moi, je crois qu'une question de sécurité et de protection, la journaliste peut bien sûr dénoncer cela, mais s'il s'avère qu'il y a un moyen d'arranger cela entre collègues au niveau de la rédaction, si elle n'est pas freelance, s'il y a une personne qui peut les aider à porter un terrain d'entente par rapport à cette situation, ça peut aussi aider à créer ce climat d'entraide mutuelle et pour que tout le monde puisse continuer à émerger dans sa profession.
Great. Thank you very, very much, Juice. We need to wrap up now. So a quick one-liner, Arno, and then Kathy. So thank you. Arno, a final word from you.
D'accord. D'accord, merci. C'est déjà encourager toutes les compteurs en ligne et celles aussi qui ne sont pas en ligne à poursuivre le grand boulot qu'elles font toutes. En Afrique de l'Ouest, nous avons la chance d'avoir une organisation depuis 5 ans maintenant. Essaie de mettre des choses en place ici. Nous essayons de créer en fait le cadre pour que les journalistes d'investigation puissent travailler sereinement. Vous voyez, au-delà du renforcement des capacités que nous organisons, nous donnons comme je disais, nous donnons des bourses pour pouvoir produire des enquêtes parce que le problème parfois pour les journalistes, c'est le moyen financier. Les médias, en fait, n'ont pas souvent les moyens pour accompagner leurs journalistes à produire.
Okay, I think we've lost Arno, so we're going to end up with Kathy. Kathy, do you want to do a final word from you?
I think very briefly, at Quote This Woman, we believe what gets measured gets changed. So please count your sources, count how many women you quote and count how many men you quote. And let us know. Let us know if you manage to close that gender gap. We'd love to know. And remember to ask yourself, whose voices are you amplifying and whose voices aren't you amplifying in the stories that you write? Our motto for Quote This Woman is the hashtag no voice left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy, too. Thank you very much, Kathy, Juice, Arno, Barbara and Najat for joining us today. So much food for thought. I think it's really important that we begin to think about what kind of safety training we're doing for journalists, particularly women journalists. And I'm talking about both physical safety training and online safety training. We need to think about networks. We need to think about resources. And hopefully you'll all be following the courses and doing the masterclasses over the next month because this conference has lots to offer. I'm also going to ask you to please have a look at the Global Investigative Journalism Network website, where there are lots of resources, and there's even a tool specifically for women, as well as the International Women's Media Foundation, which not only does safety training for women journalists, but also and has online safety training for women journalists, but also offers fellowships for programs. So to our speakers, to everyone who joined today, thank you very, very much. To Roy Blumenthal, thank you for sketching our session. And to everyone, I'll see you in the other sessions. Please don't forget that we have one more session this afternoon, the virtual launch of Anton Harber's new book called So For The Record. It starts at 6 p.m. South African time, and you can find the link to it in the program or on the app, obviously. Thank you very much, everyone. And thanks for tolerating the sudden loss of electricity on our side. Thanks a lot. Bye.